Good morning. Welcome to another session for the Azure Cloud Commanders Learning Room. So today we've got navigating cloud sustainability, insights and strategies. Very top of mind at the moment. So the speaker today is Michael. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for dedicating your evening to coming and chatting to us and sharing your knowledge with us all.
Okay.
I just want to run through. So the learning rooms used to be a Teams-based environment, but we have moved towards the Microsoft Learn ecosystem, which should open it up to a lot more people. So if you go to the tech community, search for Microsoft Learn, you can see it on the top right next to Lounge. Go down and select Community. You'll be able to then select Groups, and then that's a list of all the learning rooms. So you can join for discussion and take a look and register for the events that are coming up. So the one that I'm running at the moment is called Azure Cloud Commanders. So make sure you check that out, join in the discussion. It's a place where you can go ask questions, learn particularly around certification and knowledge around the Microsoft Azure ecosystem as well. And this is where you can see the events that we're hosting. So make sure you register for them. So this session will be recorded for the people who can't make it today. Just be wary that if you do come off mute and ask questions, it will be part of the recording. So make sure you just don't say anything that could be commercially or personally sensitive, for example. It is an inclusive session, so everyone comes from different backgrounds. No question is a stupid question. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout, so any questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, hopefully we all learn something and have some fun along the way. And I just want to hand over to Michael, who's come to present to us today. But yeah, take it away, and thank you very much for coming and presenting on sustainability with us today.
Awesome. And thank you, Luke, for inviting me. And yeah, uh, let's check if I can have the presentation on the screen. That seems to be working fine. So, welcome to the session about navigating cloud sustainability. And yeah, what is really important to get some insights and strategies. My name is Michiel Hamers, but you can all say Michael, that's no problem. Michiel is really a typical Dutch name. And yes, I'm from the Netherlands, and over here it's in the evening, but also for the people who are now on the other side of the world, it's really early for you, but also welcome for all the people who are watching it via recording. Um, a bit of myself, not too much. 47 years old, but it's ever changing. I'm an IT consultant, Microsoft certified trainer. I'm being awarded Microsoft MVP 2 times about the Microsoft Azure topic. And my favorite Azure service is Function Apps, and I'm working for the company who is called Steria. Okay, why are we going to talk about cloud sustainability? Um, it's more or less a couple of things. One of the things is because it has to do with money. Um, and when you move to the cloud, when you migrate to the cloud, when you are searching, okay, should I use the cloud? And most of the people who are watching this already have done this. But when companies are watching the cloud, the total promise is, of course, that the cloud is cheaper than using on-prem. And it's not only about money, it's also about the green eco sustainability. It's together. And they have a lot of relationships with each other. And both are really not interesting for a lot of people in management and project management. So the real problem is not the ecosystem or Azure. The problem is everyone is sleeping okay. Everyone thinks, okay, the cloud is running, the SLA is met, all the service level agreements are, all the facts and figures are correct. It is within budget. Everything is okay, but it's not. Um, and most of the time, that is. due to cloud waste. Um, for all those struggles that company has across the board, I have also stated the links where I found that information. But so the most of the companies don't know how the cloud budget is working and how that is working against budgeting the real cost and yeah, if it's one penny within the budget, it's fine, at least from the metrics perspective. um yeah, and that's not the real total situation. So um yeah, let's get more details on that one. As the cloud is growing to really a lot of data, and the data industry is 1% of the total of the world energy, and 4% of the total of the CO2 emission is from data and ICT. So we create a lot of um, environmental footprint with all those Azure data centers. And for example, if you have a Visual Studio subscription or another Azure subscription where you have an X amount of Azure credits that you can spend, you can just spend them and just say, okay, I want an Azure virtual machine. And you click next, next, finish. And after a while, if you don't shut that system off, maybe you have used the whole budget of your subscription. And then you think, okay, it was for free, no one gets hurt. Um, Still, virtual machines and also physical machines are running in those data centers. So a lot of emission and footprint is happening also for the free part of the Azure ecosystem. Um, and if you are looking the different charts about in which industry is the CO2 footprint and the emissions, where is it located? If you see the whole footprint and you check that in different data sets to get more insights where the CO2 emission footprint is the biggest, normally you see at the most graphs IT not on the sheets because it's not an own category. It's most of the time it's just in every category. So if you see a chart and you cannot find IT in it, then it's about that is in the whole graph. And yeah, everyone should be aware of that part. Um, and one of the things that you can do is just yeah, simply reduction and the basic CO2 footprint reduction by recycling or reduction of energy consumption, and of course, a sustainable design, a design that you can reuse, but also ensure that it is for longer term, or just um, let's say a throwaway architecture. So if you use it, you use it. But if you are stopping using it, really get that Azure footprint out of the Azure data centers. So sustainable does not mean that it should be on continuously. Sustainable can also be that you just throw it away. Um, and sustainability is not only CO2. Um, you can also have simple projects um, for creating more awareness in your IT environments. So one of the things that you can do, and for everyone who is now in the call or later when you're watching the recording back, um, I really encourage everyone to have in this month just one initiative that you share with your colleagues that you're going to do. For example, just shut down every virtual machine that is not in use anymore. automatically, or create a default. If you have infrastructure as code, create a default that every app services for an, an development test application production lifecycle, that you maybe can throw away some environments because you can just spin it up again, because you have it still as an infrastructure as code. You can easily redeploy. So you can also check if you can make one initiative to just throw away a lot of things. And that's not that I'm saying for you have to stop using Microsoft Azure or stop using cloud, but you can make a difference by not leaving the just simple the lights on in your environment. So, general, what you can do is, of course, also recycle equipment, and that's already been done for years. At least at our company, and what I hear also from other companies, when you have computers or servers or other technical devices, you can then give them a second life. You can have sustainable procurement so that you are only buying things that are sustainable. You can create green IT infrastructure. You can also try to ensure that you are using green coding principles. Green coding principles, there are a lot of tutorials that you can find online where you can say, okay, I want that kind of coding, which is more sustainable and also um, less heavy for a lot of compute power. And what I already mentioned, what I already mentioned, the employee awareness and engagement. Okay, but now in the whole Gen AI world, it's about data, and yeah, that improves quality. However, it's also burdensome for us here too when it's on active data storage. And active data storage, because not everything has to be on active data storage. You can easily decide that some data is not needed on active data storage, where it's not only cheaper to use archive storage or cold storage, it also reduces the footprint um, in general. So you can reduce the footprint while saving costs. Green IT infrastructure, that's, I think, the most important part of that part is that you can achieve that by optimize your data center strategy. If you have a strategy about which data center you are going to use, um, some data centers are using not optimized energy resources, but there are also data centers, also in the Microsoft Azure world, there are data centers dedicated to ensuring that it's using green energy. Um, Also, besides virtualization, you can consolidate environments, servers, uh, or server environments, and using um, energy efficiency software. And that can be a lot of different things. That can be that you have automatically tooling to switch off systems, turn off um, the application service plans, or upgrade your service plans. So the data center itself can be further optimized. So sorry for that. Um, and really try to use infrastructure as code instead of just keep that environment running with keeping the lights on. Infrastructure as code is invented that you can easily use your infrastructure the same as on production on the all different environments, development, test, acceptance, but you can also use infrastructure as code to dispose all those other environments than production. because you can always redeploy the environment. And as you can redeploy the environment, you can switch down and really remove that other environment and saving cost and saving the environment a bit. So let me check that I go to the next slide. Yes. In general, to improve your um, uh, optimization and your CO2 emission decreasing, and also at the same time having cost savings in place, you have more or less three pillars: architecture, team excellence, and continuous improvement. Let's start with a bit about architecture. And one of that architecture part is geo-efficiency. Geo-efficiency is the art of getting the same amount of compute power to different region for less impact on CO2 and a lower price. Of course, you see an schema in Europe with a lot of data centers where the electricity is with kind of difference is used. And over here you see that in Poland, for example, there is a little less um, green energy power. So you can really see that in the Nordics, the data centers are more green from um, electricity perspective, and also in that way better for the environment. Those electricity maps are one of the things that are taken into account when you're going to the Microsoft Azure portal and you go to the CO2 sustainability part. You can see how you can decrease your CO2 footprint, but it's also related to where is the data center hosted, where is that Azure data center? Because, oh, sorry. Hey, come on. Why is my presentation go? Yeah, because in the north of Ireland is a different region than Amsterdam. Both are data centers. You can check it all everywhere, and you see that some data centers have, for the same compute power, a different price, different sustainability footprint. So you can watch them on the Azure portal yourself. You should not only take into account the CO2 footprint, because also money is a really important difference when you go for geo-efficiency. And that is really huge. For our example, we use a virtual machine, this one, and we just compare that with several data centers. At the same time that is running, so just leave that system running for the whole month, then these are the prices. And if your application that you are going to host is running for, let's say, whole Europe, it doesn't really matter if there's a higher or lower ping or response time, because that still differs for every place. For example, the data center of North Europe is in general, an average, an 8% cheaper than West Europe. So you can check based on money, and you can check on sorry for money, but also for sustainability.
This is an interesting point. So, although, like, I know that the price is different between regions, not a lot of people know that, but like me, for one, never really did a one-to-one mapping between sustainability and the price. But it's a great call out, actually, that, yeah, as you go with the cheaper solutions, you almost become more sustainable because you're losing less resources. And yeah, it's a tiering system, right? So it's not only about the resources you consume, but it's about how they're coded, how lean everything is. So
Yes.
almost if you're chasing cost, you're almost chasing sustainability. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, thank you for
Yep.
sharing.
You're welcome. What I also find interesting, also Microsoft states that there are three things for to take into account, and that's not really the sustainability. That's a bit weird, but these three things are really important: the compliance, service availability, and pricing. And sustainability is one of the things that I just add. This is the same overview, but I created economic, also the green region fitting. And you have to check your third one, your network performance needs of your service. So if you check what Microsoft mentions, it's nice, but I prefer this overview because this overview is more complete. So region based on your residency and compliance. That's one of the important rules. What kind of services are supported in your regions? Your network performance needs. Sometimes it's high from needs perspective. Sometimes it's not really interesting. And the fourth one is the combination, economical and the green region fitting. So that are the four steps that you need to take into account when you are going to architect and have a good geo efficiency for cost and economic and the green footprint. And what is also an easy one is generation switching. If you compare a couple of standard systems, you have in the naming, you can see the addition of version v5 or v4. You can so also say that sometimes, in some cases, that you can have more CPU with a lower price. So if you compare the first row and this one, then you have almost the same system. I know it's not exactly the same, but it's almost the same system with more memory at lower cost. And if you combine that with a strategy of picking your correct um, data center with the correct footprint that is fitting what you think it's wise to choose based on sustainability footprint, then I think you create the right this discussion and questioning on okay what I'm going to do and how can I improve it with together maybe even have spend less money. So you can combine those things, and a lot of people are just creating an Azure resource, leave that application for a couple of years, and every couple of years there are new generations already, and the new generations are most of the time a bit cheaper. Waste is also a really important thing. I mentioned that a bit already. First of all, what is waste in the cloud? Waste in general can be that a CPU is normally really low, only have one high spark, or waste is like your own system drive where you have used a lot of gigabytes for storage, but really have a lot of storage spare already, or a virtual machine that you almost not using, but sometimes you use it. But every time when you use a virtual machine in the cloud, you have some waste. When it's 90% used every second, then it's still 10% of waste. So what you can do, and really I recommend you to do that, is create values of that. So that's an example on how you can create some um, um, metrics on this one. For example, the amount of users divided by the maximum amount of users, and then via this formula, you can make it a simple um, um, formula to ensure that you have waste in metrics. Why would you do that? If you have metrics, you can create management and steering on that one. So if you know how much waste you have in your application, you can steer a bit on that one. You can have discussion about it. Uh, can of course be calculated on every possible time frame. Can yeah, you can ensure that you uh, use it for VMs to have targeted which compute power is going to be used. If you have that metrics automatically also available to be used in a low band or whatsoever, you can also use it for distributing or scaling. So in general, um, reducing of waste in the cloud can be done by really efficiency in code, getting the right size SKU, so that the right uh, type of VM or type of active service plan, application service plan of the right generation, applying auto scaling or at least some scaling. So it doesn't have to be auto scaling. Manual scaling can also be good, but also try to reduce the zero user impact. And I think we are going to, yeah, we go to later on have more about the zero user impact and stacking. And stacking is something like combining some service plans that you use one service plan for multiple applications. Um, and that can be handy because a service plan can be attached to a skill set or whatsoever, but a service plan cannot be switched off or can only be removed. And sometimes you want to have it still running, but it is just for development or for testing and it's not used really often. Then you can use stacking and just one PowerShell command to enable stacking of service plan and then combine those applications in one service plan. In general, you for the next part you have to understand a bit about capex and opex, and that's I know that's a financial term, but in general, my definition is an own data center is capital expenditure. So it's your own data center. Um, it ensures a high upfront investment. Return of investment is based on usage. So your own data center, you should use it to the max. If you have your own data center, so not Azure or cloud, you should use it really to every single second of compute power that you can use to that data center. You should use it. The more you use it, the greener it is. And only you can, of course, use this asset. OPEX in general, only the costs are when it's operating. So not when it's in use, but when it's turned on and switched on. So the less Azure you use, the greener you are. So it's the return on investment is still based on usage. So everything in the cloud, you should ensure that everything is switched off, turned off, scaled down, um, disposed, and then just redeploy if you need, because the Azure cloud is always based on OPEX in general. And I know there are the exceptions, but in general, you should use it as less as possible. Look.
Oh, thanks. We've got a question in the chat around Sustainability Manager and whether or
Yeah.
not we'll kind of cover a bit about that in this session. I think the question was, will Sustainability Manager and the data estate be explained? But I think this might be more general concepts, but I'm just wondering.
More, this is more general concept, not the sustainable manager itself, but you can, if is it referring to the Azure portal and then just the sustainability manager, because that is just driven about the advisory of Azure portal, which is the same as the security advisor, etc. And therefore, you can see based on the default metrics how many CO2 footprint that you have. But it's in this session more general what you should take into account. And then after that, you can measure and measure and measure again. Um, but yeah, so
Okay,
that's,
cool. Yeah. All good. I think it sounds like a different opportunity for another session. So
oh,
I do
definitely.
know that
Yeah,
Microsoft has released guidance around the carbon emission dashboard as well within
yeah,
the Azure portal, so which is I think free. So I'm just
yeah,
posting a link in the chat for that. But yeah.
yeah. And yeah, yeah, maybe we can also discuss it later so that we can have a more an in detail session about that topic too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you very
Um,
much.
yes. So OpenX Azure Cloud, the less as you use, the greener you are. So that's really sounds a bit strange, but that's how it works. Um, and therefore also, if you can um, dispose environments, you're also greener. Um, So when you go to the sustainability dashboard, yeah, if you have only an Azure subscription when you need that compute power, at the other moments you are just really disposing the own environment, that's then you have benefit of um, lower footprint, but also lower prices and cost. Now, just in time cloud, that's really important. If you dispose environments, you also need sometimes just have the environment just on time. And I think most of you are a bit aware of lean DNA, which comes from Toyota. Um, there's a couple of rules that characterize the Toyota DNA, which is the lean DNA. And if we switch it over to the cloud DNA, um, it's really important that you have everything specified to content and sequence and time and outcome. So every infrastructure should be defined and automatically deployed. Every request response collection must be direct, and there should be always a simple or a yes or no back for requested received responses to get that simple and efficient um, architecture scenarios on table. Um, and everything should have a scientific method to ensure that you are um, not creating waste, ensuring that your costs are lower. And that scientific methods, I have underlined it, it's not scientific, doesn't have to be that it's really like a complete study, but ensure that it's at least measurable, and so create some measurements and create some metrics and create some dashboarding, and therefore you can use your own values like the waste that we discussed, but also you can create metrics about the usage of your application and how better you are creating that usage for your application and getting that insights in metrics, then you get a more optimized application. Um, so, oh, sorry. Lean manufacturing is about defects, excess processing, overproduction, waiting inventory, transportation, non-utilized talent. Lean cloud is more or less the same. as it comes to optimize quality, keep the application simple. You really need Kubernetes about waiting the right SKUs, reduce traffic size, and non-utilized tenants. Um, so basic rules, automate everything. Use in cloud always the native architecture. So don't try to move over your virtual machines to the cloud and then try to optimize it. Really try to use the cloud native architecture, um, design with the cloud first principle, and create monitoring. And at the same time that I say monitoring, only monitor what you are going to use or going to automatically be using in your process flow. Because monitoring and then just send out an email to everyone, you shouldn't do that one. You really should monitor if you are going to really do something with the data that comes out of that monitoring step. That's from the architectural perspective. And then about now a bit more about the continuous improvement. Um, when it comes to budgeting, um, that needs to be improved also, because in the cloud, we hope that everyone has an elastic cloud and that you can um, scale up, scale out, etc., but also scale down, scale in. But on Black Friday, when all the sales are happening, you should not have an budget that is really let's say stopping the application and stopping the website. So the Black Friday deals are not working anymore. So an elastic cloud means also an elastic budget. And most of the budgets that I have seen in the different Azure cloud environments are not using an elastic budget. Most of the time they are having a budget, if they have a budget, a real high budget that is that the Black Friday moments are working fine, and for the rest of the year, it's also fine. But it's an elastic cloud that should be elastic too. Um, so in general, there are uh, uh, um, some different types of budgeting. And what I see the most of the time is a free for all, not really budgets, just use it as you please. And the other one that I see a lot of times is the fixed budget. And that is, okay, it's working now, it's working even for Black Friday. It's therefore it's almost works every time. Only when you have a DDoS attack across several days, then the budget kicks in, and then it is stopping everything. But that are not the two preferred methods. The three preferred methods are the other ones. Variable, based on whatever your company is targeted for, or method based. And most of the time, it's just like this. Staying 1 cent euro below budget is that you stayed within budget. That's most of the time the target for a lot of companies. And you can pretty easy um, change that. For example, by telling that there is an incentive to lower your cost. And budgeting on metrics instead of fixed figures. So if you say, I have a website that is selling books on internet, and I always sell a lot during the holiday season in December, then maybe my budget for January up until November is really low because the website is rarely used, and in December maybe it's really heavily used, and that you then have a higher budget because then everyone is searching for a new book. So create an incentive for your team, but also create some metrics that you can use for altering the budget over time. And therefore, you need to have visibility, small data sets, and cost allocation, because if you have some cost allocation, then you can also say, okay, I want more budget for that team or that project because they are delivering more money and more income. Um, when it's for that cost allocation part and creating categories, I normally use the cloud major expenditure categories. And if you want to create, or if you want to create one screenshot of a slide, I really recommend that this is the one, because these are all the categories that you can ensure that you have correct categories for all the different um, expenditure, to ensure that you have a good overview where where the money flows, where the compute power flows, where the footprint flows. So these are the major expenditure categories. Um, because if you know this and you have insight in this kind of information, then you can also create correct budgeting on your environments. One of the things that I mentioned is zero user impact. And what is that? It's the amount of impact associated with running your cloud environment without any user-based activity. So you can see it as, okay, the supermarket is open, the lights are on, the door is open, there's everywhere is people who are willing to help, but there's still not a user inside the supermarket. That number, say impact number, cost number, I'm not sure how you want to create that value or create that metric, but I really dare every one of you to create that kind of figure that you know how much your application is cost for running without any user-based activity. Because if you know that number, then you can also say for every new customer or every new user, maybe it's an increase in budget, or that I allow that is more budget allowed for the application. If you have 1,000 more subscriptions, that you may say, okay, then the budget may be higher. And you should create some insight in your application or in your cloud environment that you know what the user impact is, and that starts with a zero user impact. So the application is running without any user still in it. What is then the amount of cost and the footprint of your application? If you know that one, then you can make also the additional steps. And then you can make the additional steps by, for example, creating shared resources to reduce cost, scaling, create some transparency about cost and emission visibility to customers. For that part, you can use the CO2 sustainability portal of Microsoft, the carbon calculator, etc. Also, some usage analytics, and you can create a regular cost audit. Um, if you do that, then you can, of course, also create some cost saving opportunities. Besides the Azure Cost Management, there are also other tooling like the AWS Cost Explorer, the Google Cloud Cost Management tools, and of course the Azure Cost Management. If you are going to use Azure Cost Management as in your toolbox to monitor your cost of Google, or if you are going to use Azure Cost Management to monitor AWS costs, be aware that Microsoft is charging you 1% for the compute power of those two non-Microsoft Azure environments. So it will increase cost if you're using the Azure Cost Management to monitor and maintain non-Microsoft data centers. So it can be done. You can just select them and incorporate them. But my recommendation is use the toolbox of each each data center to monitoring their own data center. So I would recommend using AWS for AWS, Google for Google, and Microsoft for Microsoft. And automate every step that you are doing for cost management in those three toolbox or tool applications, automate everything for that one. Because if you go to automate that and you are going to, let's say, extract the information of those three to your own environment, for example, in your own Power BI environment, that automation doesn't have any operational costs in it, only the storage that you use or the compute power that you use. But that is with such small data, because the cost management data itself is, well, yeah, some text files and some simple compute power that almost costs nothing. So, and then you are really self in control. Um, the last category, the last pillar is team excellence. And with that one, you have also a bit of green coding, because if you are going to check the team, then you have people who are going to code, and then you can follow green coding principles. For example, to optimize your code, resource optimize, but also following energy efficient design patterns like caching, lazy coding, async, also sustainable development, for example, that you use containerization because um, sorry, because if you use containers in your setup, um, those are sustainable from the perspective that your application can be transferred over multiple cloud environments, and on that way more more friendly to use, that you don't rebuild every time that you switch from a cloud provider. But at the same time, how often is that scenario really in place? And that's something that you can say, okay, in our organization that can be the case, that you need to be switching from data center to data center or cloud providers to cloud provider, because serverless computing can also be sustainable, as it then only paying for each run. For example, if it comes to an Azure function in the cloud, that's a good example for serverless computing. And then you are going only paying when it runs and every time it gets triggers. But then it's not really easy to move your Azure function to, for example, an AWS environment, because there they have another type of implementation of serverless computing, and they don't have Azure functions, but they have their own tooling to create that. So sustainable also depends on what your target of your business is using, and which architectural principles are fixed and which architectural principles can evolve over time. One of the things that I really think it's worthwhile to check, are there any application end of life? And when the application is not end of life yet, but for example, you know that an application is running end of life December this year, maybe you can already delete the development and the test environment so that you only have one non-production environment instead of four. One instead of two environments, so one non-production environment and one production environment. Then you have also less footprint. And we discussed a bit about that sustainability and the carbon um, um, tooling from Microsoft, but that tooling is not providing you the insight that you can switch off and delete complete environments. The carbon footprint tracker is just how much emission is it is creating during a certain lifespan. So how much trees can be saved, or how much CO2 is footprint, how big is that for last year? And that can be mandatory, maybe legally mandatory for your environment due to regulatory affairs, laws, etc., so that you have it in your year IT figures, that you have that in your system. Okay, and then you can really use that advisory and the green coding and the carbon tracker. So then you know what your footprint is. But if you don't check your enterprise applications, that won't be in your environment that you need to do that. That's something that you need to come up with yourself. Also, for testing perspective, uh, if you're going to test something, you can just spin up the testing environment just before that you want to go to test and then dispose it afterwards. And also, reducing software load. Um, if you say we have some libraries still in the coding and in the source code, and it's not needed or not sure that you need it, if you can eliminate dependencies on libraries, that also ensures that there's less compute power needed, less compute power is cheaper and has a lower footprint. So in general, code optimization, sustainable development, phasing out end-of-life application, testing efficiency, and reduce software bloat. Um, what I also recommend, and that is connected with what the question was earlier, follow the learn path of the principle of software engineering, of sustainable software engineering, and you can also just find that on learn.microsoft.com. So follow those learning paths about sustainable software engineering. It's really easy to follow. I really recommend that one. Some insights that in general, AI is most of the time using Python as an easy to compute against that environment, but Python is not efficient on compute power. C# is a bit in the middle, and C is really most efficient. Also, so make the right decision that fits what your needs is. A more extensive list, including energy, time, and how much MB, so memory it costs, is over here. And you can see if C has energy in relation 1, Python is 75 times as much. Also from time that it takes in compute power to process things, it's C is then 1 and 71 is Python. So be aware that um, that that are a lot of differences in compute power. If you want to reduce how long things take, or how much compute power, or how much footprint it generates, this is also a really important factor that you should take into account. And I'm not saying everyone should be programming C, just creating some awareness that the differences are really, really, really huge. Um, Back to budget, developers are checking Kubernetes and they are checking ChatGPT how to create Kubernetes. Policies, everyone is drowning in policies, and Azure budgeting, everyone is already forgotten. Even when it was just 50 minutes ago that we are talking about budgeting, everyone is still forgetting that one. So, and that's in general every team. Our typical DevOps team is some designer and a Q&A engineer and some developers. But I would recommend to create a team with a lot of different expertise, but also that one is responsible for cost, for visibility, emission visibility, continuous learning. Really ensure that in your team for the next stand-up or for next planning, ensure that someone in your team has for 1 or 2 or 3 sprints, um, make that person responsible for these kind of topics. So not only about cost, but also for creating that every kind of expertise is within your team, also the cost, also for the collaboration, also for the cost visibility, the emission visibility, and the learning part. So if one is responsible for that one, for that topic, that really helps. Besides that, what also can help to reduce cost and submission, give insights to the people who are really using. So if you have a central IT environment um, who has a lot of subscriptions, maybe you should send out to every subscription owner a list what the costs are for that um, subscription. Because if they have an overview every month of what the costs are, people are more willing to reduce the cost and therefore also reducing the footprint. So sending out email with this cost, this environment for the last month can already create some awareness um, about, okay, oh, I see that it's now €1,000 in a month. Maybe I should remove it or optimize it. And also some anomalies alerts can you just use from Microsoft, where you say, okay, and when an anomaly alert is on your Azure subscription, then you just get an email. Hey, I see that it's 80% more or less on cost. Therefore, I send you a reminder. So it's not like budgeting, but an anomaly alert on your environment can be really helpful. Good. Um, Reducing your CO2 impact can be done, for example, via the carbon optimization with the emission trends. If you go to the Azure portal, you can have the emission trends and then you get some insights, but still it won't help you to advise you to turn off a system or dispose. But it helps to get some insights and adjust the carbon optimization emission trends. So really, I encourage you everyone to at least dive into it a bit and open it to get um, some idea, and then also check the emission reductions because that really helps to get some first steps done. So when you combine it together, in general summary, remove waste, create your own toolbox, create metrics. Bigger is not always better, and ensure that your company is creating, I hope, for a net zero emission. So really try to focus on making small steps. And so in the end, it will be a bit better. My name is Micha Hamers. I'm presenting you the Navigation Cloud Sustainability Insight Strategies. The QR code is a link to my LinkedIn. If you want to connect to me, feel free to reach out. Also, for if you want to have the PowerPoint presentation or other insights or other moments that you still have some questions about this topic or any other topic that is related to Azure cost management, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting a fire hose of information today. Very, very key. And I think it's really good to start having this conversation and making people aware of the impact of sustainability. So thank you very much to come and present today. I don't think there's any questions in the chat, but yeah, for anyone reaching out, make sure you connect and yeah, and join. That really great subject and really great topics that I will definitely be going away and digging a bit deeper into. So thank you very much for spending your evening presenting to us all. And yeah,
thank you for the invitation, Luke.
no worries. I'll stop the recording, but thank you very much again.